Hey guys, so in this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the Novaic 48 volt golf cart battery. And I guess you'd pronounce it Novaic, not Novaic. I'm going to go with Novaic. So like I mentioned, this is a 48 volt golf cart battery, so that puts you at 51.2 nominal voltage. And this battery may tick a lot of boxes for people. So it has a screen, which you're going to say a lot of other golf cart battery screen, of course. You're going to see that in a lot of other golf cart battery packages. And it has some other equipment that came with it too. I'll show you guys that here in a minute. But the discharge and the charging rate are a bit different than your average battery. So this is a 105 amp hour battery, although they don't list it on the outside case, which is a little odd to me. Most times they'll have all of that either on the top or on the side. But it has a continuous output of 250 amps on this battery. I wouldn't recommend doing that all the time, but it can do it. And it can do 500 amps for 30 seconds. And then I think it's like 1,000 amps for 3 seconds. So it's pretty impressive, the specs that they have on this. They also mention EV grade cells, which most other batteries do, but they even mention an EV grade BMS. So it's going to be interesting to see what that looks like inside this battery. This does not come with a Bluetooth, which I think is a bit of a bummer. I mean, not everyone's going to use that. Most people are just going to use the screen anyway, but it's nice to be able to see the stats on your phone sometimes. It does come with heaters, which is pretty nice. So golf carts aren't really going to be tooling around in the snow, but more and more people are getting Polaris type vehicles, so side by sides, and putting snow plows on them and using them that way. So this battery could work in the winter. Anything below 32 degrees, the heating pads will kick on and this will be able to function still. So technically you can discharge lower than 32 degrees, but if you want to charge, then lithium iron phosphate can be damaged if it's 32 and below. So that's what the heaters are for. I already ran a capacity test on the battery and it's right at 107 amp hours. Actually, just a little over 107 amp hours. And that's fine. This is a 105 amp hour battery. And we'll see that on different batteries. A lot of times the BMS has sort of a conservative setting. They don't want it draining the cells too low and damaging anything. So people assume that may be the cells are not quite the best quality. But more often than not, at least lately, we're seeing BMSs kind of set and not allowing it to get much below that, at least on some batteries. VATWare batteries will go all the way down and drain completely, and I'll get a lot of capacity out of them. But some other batteries, like EG4 batteries, they have a conservative setting on that BMS, so they're not going to let them get too low. Anyway, as far as charging amperage, they usually recommend 20 amps, somewhere in that range for a battery this size. The charger they send with it is a 20 amp charger. You can charge 105 amps continuous on this battery. I mean, I don't know if anybody's actually going to do that unless they're using this for solar storage. And at that point, even, they should probably get a second battery if they're charging it that heavily. So I'll pop this apart. We'll take a look on the inside. I'll show you guys the screen. I guess before that, I'll show you what came with it. This is I think they sent like the full package with this. So it has the step down converter, the buck converter, to be able to step down to 12 volt for your appliances, for your headlights and everything in the golf cart. But also comes with some plugs and connections and stuff. So I'll show you that first. Then we'll pop the lid off, see what it looks like inside, see what this EV grade BMS looks like. All right, what came in the package? So the charger, like I mentioned before, this is a waterproof charger. Pretty standard for chargers for golf cart batteries. I mean, you're going to have some different styles, but pretty similar. The difference here is that we have a quick disconnect here. So an Anderson connector to be able to hook into this section here, which goes to the battery. So that is different. You don't normally have that. Here's the connection that will go into your golf cart battery to be able to hook the charger into. That's fairly standard also. You'll see that in some packages you get. And then the buck converter, like I mentioned. So this is going to convert that 48 volt down to 12 volts. Another interesting thing to mention about the charger here is it has a connection that goes to the battery itself. So there is communication between battery and charger, which is not something you're going to see. I haven't seen that on any other golf cart batteries. The connections are really neat too. I'll show you guys that here in a minute. There's very little of anything else to look at on the battery besides the business end here, which is positive and negative terminals. Then you'll see here the different connections: charger, screen, and switch. Like I mentioned before, the charger actually hooks up to the battery itself. But another unique thing here is the screen is the on and off switch. So that could be good and bad, I guess. If the screen were to break for some reason, you wouldn't have access to the battery, I guess. That's the only kind of bad thing I can think about it. Otherwise, I kind of like the way they do this. Now watch. So this is the screen hookup. They've got a little red dot for where to put those terminals in, and they're like a quick connect. Very nice. So that's the switch one. And then if we turn the screen on here, do you guys hear the little click? That was a relay inside of the battery, I think, clicking. We'll take a look at those when we get the lid off. The screen itself is almost like a, I don't know, like a small laptop or something. When you press something, you actually see the little cursor on it. So you do get all the details you're going to want on any other screen, but it's a little more detailed than some of the other ones. And again, that little cursor thing, I guess that's sort of irritating. But you can see here from the testing and from charging, you'll see high voltage disconnect, low voltage disconnect. And these warnings stay on there all the time. Not really fond of that either. I guess somebody could leave it on this instead. You kind of see the voltage. But if you're going to, this is almost like the status screen, but it's also the alarm screen at the same time. I'd rather not see any of that mess. I just wanted to see the percentage, really. That's the only thing I would want to see. But anyway, all right. So technically, it's saying we could go 59 miles on this charge. So let's get the lid off of the battery. I don't know if you guys can make this out, but there's a, looks like a dent right there. This was actually bent in when it got shipped, and I bent it back. So there's no resin board or anything on the top, no plastic barriers, but they do have the cells covered up with this plastic here. Wow, what an interesting build. Man, okay, before I pop this off, these look like those little rivets. I've dealt with them in the past, so once you snap them off, they're off. So I'll have to pop them off here in a minute. Before I do that, though, let's scoot this around and we'll check this out, because this is really interesting here. All right, so I looked this fuse up here. It's an EV grade fuse from what I can tell, 500 amp fuse. So that's a serious fuse to use in this little golf cart battery. And check this out. The BMS, can you guys make that out down there? All of the leads from the cells go into the BMS, but the main feeds from the cells themselves go straight out here. The negative goes to what looks like a shunt. I think that's a shunt to monitor the battery capacity, which is another unique thing. No wire leads coming out from the batteries themselves. So no cable coming out from them, just bus bars, insulated bus bars. The negative goes through a shunt straight out. The positive goes through that 500 amp fuse and then goes through the relay, which I heard clicking when you turn that switch on. Yeah, that's honestly, that's pretty impressive there. I've never seen a BMS like that, though. So I guess it's an EV grade BMS. I've never seen it before. I can't really see a serial number on it. But whatever type of BMS it is, I've never seen one like that before. And also the shunt. Like, most people don't bother installing a shunt. As a matter of fact, that's another thing I haven't seen before. A shunt in a battery like this to be able to get accurate battery capacity. So state of charge is normally, it can vary a little bit on batteries like this. So smaller type systems won't be utilizing a shunt at all normally. So that is something that is very unique. I can't see an amp rating on the shunt. Let me take a look. No, I don't see anything on the shunt itself. You can even see all these wire leads are labeled, and this one's even labeled shunt right here. Let's see if we can get a closer look at the BMS. Yeah, I don't see any markings on it that would identify what it is. But that's neat, though. I mean, I'm not sure how well it functions or longevity-wise, but it seems like most people might end up leaning that way in the future. Not having to run all of your main positive and negative through it means you're going to have a lot less heat in the BMS itself, which I would think would help it to last longer. Yeah, and I don't see any markings on the relay on the main positive. But that's a cool idea too. But granted, I think it could be hooked into a switch on the outside, not just the screen. So that would be kind of my one complaint with that, is it is controlled by the screen alone to be able to click this relay on. Once the relay clicks on, the main positive becomes hot. And right there, we can see a heating pad going over to the side there. You're always going to look for those white wires. And I see another over here. So this must go to where the heaters are. Maybe we'll get a better look when we pop the top off of the cells. I'm not sure, though, because that's pretty tight right there. But you can see just the corner of that orange heating pad. All right, let's see if we can get these plastic rivets off of here. They're usually a pain. Once you pop them, they go flying. And they might just stay on there while the case comes off. So they've got some adhesive on the side of this as well, so they're not just depending on the rivets. And this is spaced off of the cell, so you see the vents. Technically, I guess they look like they were blocked there, but it's cupped over the cell, so there's a space. Let's see if I can get a shot from the side before I take the other one off. Yeah, so that's what it looks like there. So there is space in between the vents and the top of that shielding. It'd probably be better to just put something on the lid of the battery. I don't even know why they would have to put it right there. Certainly not wrong either way. All right, so these are 105 amp hour EVE cells. I checked all that out on the code decoder. But just as normal, there's always something that doesn't show up. The manufacturer date, I can't get on it. It says the code is the wrong length for some reason. I think it needs a little bit more of what's underneath this laser welded bus bar. So that's a good point to bring up here, is these have the bevel in them, which is nice to see. Wire management is great in here, except right here. These two main wire leads are rubbing against this bolt. And the main thing with golf cart batteries, and I've done so many of them pretty recently anyway, or at least it seems like a lot, that the biggest thing to remember with golf cart batteries is it's not just about the quality of the build, but it's about motion. So these are going to be rattling around for quite some time. And this is, overall, it's a great build. They have what looks like an aluminum side on either one, and that's bolted down to the frame below. And that's what is applying pressure on here. So tension. And they have these metal, what looks like aluminum bands strapped around it also, with insulators all the way around. So that is in great shape. So as far as motion, but yeah, something like this, something simple like this, with these main wire leads rubbing on that. And then over here, you'll see they have a stud sticking up occasionally on these laser welded bus bars. And that stud is meant for a little tiny nut that they would put these wire leads on. But occasionally you'll have one that isn't being used because these are universal. And this one here, again, you have the potential of it rubbing on there. So that is one thing I think for them, as far as critique, I would have something to bind this wire down a little better. They did such a great job on the rest of the build. That's something so simple, but the simple things can really get you sometimes. And just like I was thinking, you really can't get a look at those heating pads on the sides. You can just make out a little bit of orange. And I don't think you guys can see the bands either, but they've got those metal bands like I mentioned before. And they've got some of that fish paper and some insulation back there. And then the bands themselves have a rubber insulation on them for tensioning. I don't know if I've seen anybody do this either. That aluminum side with the foam in between, and then over here, same thing. And that's bolted down to the frame. Really nice. Yeah, just a really cool build overall. I think these were intended, these are those little sticky pads they have, and they're probably intended to kind of aim this wire around. But yeah, really, really nice overall. And what's that? So there's a little cavity down below. Let me shine a light down there. Let's take a look. All right, I figured out what this is. It's a 10 ohm resistor. Really hard to see the numbers. You can't. As much light as I try to put on it. I'll put a picture of what it is, though. I can make out the numbers myself. So yeah, it's RX24-100 watt. So they put a pre-charged resistor in here too. That is wild, man. I mean, they've got they've got a lot of stuff in this small golf cart battery. So I don't know how many things that makes this that is not common, but we've got a lot of things that you're not going to see on a typical golf cart battery, from the BMS to the fuse to the shunt to the pre-charge resistor. Yeah, just the way it's wired, really. Totally different. I'm going to take off temperature sensor number 1 here. And we'll put that in some ice water. We should see the temperature drop on the screen. And then hopefully we'll get the heaters to kick in. I'll turn this on here, see if you guys can hear. Yeah, did you hear that click? Here, listen. When I turn it off, hold on, let me let it load up first. Okay, when I turn it off, I'll get the mic close and you guys can hear the relay click. I don't think there's a point in putting the charger on it. You'll see the heaters kick on right here. That should light up once the temperature gets low enough. Does it show temperature? Yeah, cool. So it shows it right here on the top left. So when that dips down to 32, hopefully we'll see the heaters kick on right there. All right, we've got the sensor in that cup of ice water, and it's dropping quickly. Temperature on the top left is dropping quickly. Oop. A relay just clicked. Warning, high discharge temperature. Huh. Wouldn't it be the opposite? This is a low discharge temperature? What just happened there? All right, well, let's try that again. I'll warm it up. Okay, turned back on. So let's try that again. Maybe, so some BMSs have the temperature, a high and a low temperature. No, it's not liking, no, the relay just clicked again. It is not liking that cold, but for some reason it's not reading lower than 62. It could be that the temperature sensor is clicking it off early. Let me see, does it have another page with more details? Yeah, low discharge temperature instead of high. Okay. So it's reading 60, but it must dip so low and then just not even, let's see, 17 Fahrenheit. So that, oh yeah, temperature sensor number 1, 17 Fahrenheit. Okay, well, let's go back up. The thing is, shouldn't the heater kick on instead of the warning? So now we're up to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Maybe it's just so rapid, it's figuring the heat can't keep up with it. All right, so turn back on at 68. We'll dip it down again. Yeah, it clicks right at 32, 30 degrees. In that area, it just clicks it off altogether. It won't charge or discharge. And my guess is, right now, it's probably engaging the heaters, but I don't see anything highlighted on the top here. I would imagine like that little icon right there would be lit up. But it doesn't really let you push on that. Let me get, yeah, there's not really a better way to check this. Well, good news is it does disengage at the correct temperature. And what I'm thinking is it's probably a consensus between all the different temperature sensors would probably make it turn the heaters on. I'm not sure what it would take to engage the heaters. So at the very least, we know that it will not charge or discharge below 32 degrees. And yeah, I'm going to close it back up now. I just don't really like, I know I mentioned them briefly before, but I don't like these universal bus bars they're using and just leaving those studs up in the air, the threaded studs they don't use. So it makes sense to have them for temperature sensors and or balancing leads, but to just have them sitting up there, it's just a sharp surface for something to snag on. All right, guys. Well, yeah, to wrap things up, the heaters should have kicked on, in my opinion. I'm going to email them. If it's something short, I'll just put it down below. If it's longer, I'll have to just edit something in. I'll splice it in here. Okay, so this is the official splice in here to talk about the heaters. They sent me the parameters, so how the heaters turn on, why they turn on. Most of it was to be expected, but it was sort of as I suspected there. If there's a differential, if there's a difference of 5 degrees Fahrenheit between the two sensors, the heaters are not going to kick on. It's going to disengage, thinking that perhaps there's something else going on. So yeah, in other words, when there's one sensor in ice water and the other one is 76 degrees or 80 degrees or whatever it was, so that's a little bit more than that temperature differential will allow. So in order to get this thing to actually kick them on, I would have to probably dip each sensor in water together, which I'm not going to do. But yeah, this icon should light up when the heaters come on, sorry. So anyway, that answers that. Build quality wise, this is probably the battery to beat. It's just around the same price as a Vatrer. Vatrer does have really, really nice wire management. Wire management was about the only thing I could pick on in there as far as where they had it routed. I think they need to improve that a bit. But yeah, the fact that it has all the different options that you'd want, the high discharge rate, which again, you know, I would probably not get close to that if you want the battery to last a good amount of time, but it does have an extremely high discharge rate. It has a relay, has a fuse in it. Yeah, I just haven't seen another battery like this. Price-wise, it's very similar to a Vatrer. I think it's around $1,200 for the full package, maybe a bit more. I can put it down below, and I'll put a link in the description. But it's right in that area there where all the other golf cart batteries, the higher-end golf cart batteries are, usually right in the $1,000 to $1,200 range. Maybe with the extras, it might be in the $1,400 range. So my only thing with this would be the fact that this is a new company. So how long we think they're going to stick around. To me, it's a good sign, all the different extras they put in this, that they're going to stick around a while. But you do have more established companies like the ones I've reviewed in the past, the Lead Time or the Vatrer batteries. Those have been around a little longer. So when it comes to warranty, you know, that might be a deciding factor for some people. But they all had to start somewhere. So this company hasn't been around too long. Like I said, they did send me another version of this battery originally, but it needed some work. It would discharge. It was, I guess, more like a prototype at that point. But yeah, it would discharge just sitting there. That's another thing. Like the Vatrer batteries and some of the others, they have that on-off button there. And they even have it written above. If you do not turn that button off, it will slowly discharge. So, I don't know, 2-3% a day. This company here had a similar issue, even with that fancy BMS they have in there. So they fixed that. So the screen had some issues on the backside. It wasn't completely waterproof. They fixed that. They fixed that discharge issue. And it came right at 50%, just like you'd want it to. That's a good sign. When I got the prototype one they sent, it was dead, like 0%. So it had been discharging the entire time they sent it. So, like I mentioned, build quality-wise, I don't think you can go wrong with this. If it had a Bluetooth, it'd be nicer. That's sort of a picky thing. I think the screen's fine. So Bluetooth, yeah, it's basically got anything else you'd want. So like I said, I'll leave a link in the description below to this battery. You can check it out. Look at the description yourself. Look over the specs. And let me know what you guys think. I mean, have you guys seen any other batteries with pre-charge resistors, the relays, fuses, and stuff like this would have? I know that Epic batteries do have fuses in them, and I believe they have resistors. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, I haven't seen it. I mean, I don't know if I've seen anything else like this. And the BMS too. I mean, I think that's crazy. Most people would use a JBD BMS in these, and they usually get the 200 amp discharge one or the 250. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, these people went, like I said, they went different with it for sure. All right, guys. Well, thank you for watching and stay tuned.